Welcome everyone to the spiritual geography of the land of Israel. We started this series last week, and I want to just review very quickly for new people and people who are here. First of all, we just looked at the whole concept of Israel being in the center of the world and what that means. Israel is situated between Africa, Asia, and Europe, and what that meant in ancient times, what it means in present times, politically, religiously, economically. So that's how we really started this series on the spiritual geography, because that's such a major important fact about Israel, that it quite literally, for all those reasons I mentioned, is in the middle of the world. And then we took three different passages from the Parshat of Eikev in the book of Devarim, Deuteronomy, where we saw that these were really the most beautiful and extensive descriptions of the land. And so we learned these three passages, and especially its connection to rain, and mentioning that in this series, we're also going to be dealing with agriculture and the fruits and the trees of Eretz Yisrael, which is dependent on the type of geography it is, the topography. So that's what we did last week. But I want to start with reviewing one of the verses that we read from Parshat Eikev. Again, this is the most beautiful description of Eretz Yisrael, where it says, Eretz asher lo b'miskenut tochal ba lechem, lo techsar kol ba. So it says, a land that you will not eat bread in, how does it translate it? With poverty. There is nothing lacking from this land. But there's a different way to read it, and that's where we're going to start tonight, is that you won't eat bread in this land in poverty. Lo techsar, you will not lack, comma, kol ba, everything is in it. Instead of reading, you will lack nothing, even more literally, you will not lack, kol ba, everything is in it. So when we look at the land of Israel, the part of the uniqueness from a spiritual geography is that in such a small land, it encompasses so many different climates and topography. And so it's not the only place. I'm going to list from north to south many of the things that Israel has. And many countries have these, though not all countries. One of the main geographical factors of Israel that it runs along the Mediterranean Sea. Now, many countries are bordered by oceans or seas, but there are many whole countries that are landlocked. If you look at Europe, there are many countries that aren't bordering the Mediterranean or the Northern Sea or the Atlantic. And in Africa, there are many countries that border the Atlantic, or on the other side, the Indian Ocean. But many countries are landlocked. They're not connected to large bodies of water. If we look at the United States or Canada, so the coasts are on the Atlantic and the Pacific. But most of the country is landlocked, is not by a major body of water. Of course, many countries have mountains, have valleys, have springs, have rivers, have deserts. But there is no country in the world as small as Israel that has all of these things. So from the north, we have a snow-capped mountain, Mount Hermon, which is approximately 7,500 feet tall, around 2,500 meters. But in Israel, it's like this crowning glory. The Psalms talk about Mount Hermon is this like a crown of the land with the snow. The Galilee is full of hills and mountains and valleys. When you go farther south, we discussed the spine of the country that runs right through the middle, from Shechem to Yerushalayim to Hebron. And then in the south, 40% of modern Israel, at least, is desert. On the west, we're bordered by the Mediterranean for a good part of the land. And there we have very fertile plains. And in the south, by a lot, it's the Red Sea. And so Israel, if you want to compare it, is around the size of New Jersey. So as I said, many countries have mountains and valleys and rivers and lakes and all of this, but not a country as small as Israel. Added to this, Israel has a number of things that most countries don't have. It is the lowest place on the face of the earth, the Dead Sea, and all the way up the African Syrian rift. Tiferet and Yam Kinneret is also below sea level. That whole valley is below sea level, but the Dead Sea is quite literally the lowest place on the face of the earth. Another unique thing that Israel has is in the Negev by Mitzpeh Rimon is the largest natural crater in the world. There are many craters in the world, but many of them were created by either meteorites or by rivers, let's say the Grand Canyon was carved out by the Colorado River. But the crater by Mitzpeh Rimon is a natural crater. And some refer to it as the Grand Canyon of Israel. It's very spectacular. There's a second crater called the Great Crater, which is just as beautiful, by the city of Yerucham. So here you have two geographical elements that are the unique ones in the world. Down south, Israel has coral reefs. Now, most countries that are bordered by water don't necessarily have coral reefs, but Israel has coral reefs, including dolphins. And actually, recently, sharks have been coming more and more often offshore of the Mediterranean. So my main point here is, in such a small country, to have so many different geographical areas, and including climates. I'll never forget, my wife and I once took the tram up to the top of Mount Hermon in the summer. It was like August. It was very, very hot. So we just didn't think of anything. We didn't even take a sweater with us. It was so hot. I'll never forget when we got to the top of Mount Hermon. This is in August. It was freezing. It was freezing. We didn't know what to do with ourselves. So we had no sweaters or jackets, and we had to wait for the tram to go back down. And so we had to go into like this warming room. So here, just within a couple thousand feet, we went from like a blistering summer day to freezing. Now there was still snow on the top in August. There not always is. So this is a very, very important about the secrets of Eretz Yisrael. The spiritual geography is what's called the little that holds a lot. Now this concept is related to the letter Yud. The letter Yud is the smallest of all of the letters. And in the Talmud, it's described as the little that holds a lot. Hama'at shemachzik et merubah. The little that holds a lot. Now, of course, Yud is the first letter of God's four-letter name, the essential name of God, the Tetragrammaton. And it represents, Tzimtzum, contraction. This, of course, something we've learned many times, is the teaching of the Arizal, that when God wanted to create the world, how could infinity find a place for finite reality, something outside of God, as it were? And so God contracted, again, as it were, his infinite being and created a vacuum where finite reality could take place. And so that secret is called the secret of Tzimtzum, and it's connected to the first letter of God's name. But it's also connected to the secret of Eretz Yisrael. Because last week we asked almost a little bit facetiously that if Israel is the chosen people and God chose this land for Abraham, he couldn't have made someplace a little bit bigger, a little bit more tropical, with lots of rivers and lakes, and we have one freshwater lake. So, but the answer is that the secret is that Eretz Yisrael represents the actual dynamic of the creation of the world. And this is a whole other subject, which I already discussed in this other series, which I alerted everyone to, the 4-part series called The Holiness of the Land of Israel, available on YouTube. But the secret of creation is intrinsically connected to the secret of the land of Eretz Yisrael, the spiritual geography of Eretz Yisrael. So what I'd like to do is read you a poem that I wrote about this whole idea of being such a small land, but encompassing so much. I will mention that according to tradition, after Mashiach comes, the holiness of Eretz Yisrael will spread to the entire world. So this is first of all, is the contraction, and then there's the expansion that allows finite reality to exist. In modern scientific terms, it's the speck or the point of the Big Bang, which is a little that holds a lot. What did this point of the Big Bang contain? The entire universe that would develop, including the tens of billions. I just heard they're now thinking there's up to 1 trillion galaxies. This term, we can't even comprehend what that means. 1 trillion galaxies, but it was all contained in the point of the Big Bang. And that is the secret of Eretz Yisrael. It's the little that holds a lot. So this poem is called, it comes from my book of collected poems called Reflections at Sunset. And this poem is called From the Galilee to the Galaxy. By the waterfall in Nachal Chermon, I sat in wonder and in awe. Nature's divine face reflected in the rushing water and trees so tall. I meditated on the land given to us so long ago and the deep connection over millennium that keeps us returning, a constant river flow. From the Galilee to the galaxy, from the Kinneret to the Golan, from the Eilat Mountains to En-Gedi, from the Holy Land to the infinite beyond. The snow-capped Hermon in its majesty, the world's largest natural crater in Mitzpeh Ramon, the lowest point on earth by the Dead Sea, a divine spark in every valley, tree, and stone. The whole world in miniature is found in this mysterious place, the secret of time eternal and the elasticity of space. From within borders so very small is contained so very much. Within temporal reality is hidden a mystical touch, opening the portals of the heart while enlightening the mind, giving us a sense of purpose and unbounded treasures to find. From the Galilee to the galaxy, from Lake Kinneret to the Golan, from the Eilat Mountains to En-Gedi, from the Holy Land to the infinite beyond. So that was my attempt in poetic, mystical terms to try to capture this idea of the small, the little that holds a lot. So that is how I wanted to kind of complete what we learned last week as an introduction to the spiritual geography of the land of Israel. So what I want to do now is, everyone knows we just had Tu B'Shvat, and I hope everyone had a beautiful, meaningful Tu B'Shvat. And since it was on my list of things to cover in this series, I decided I'd like to dedicate the rest of the class to the 7 fruits of the land of Israel. In the same passage that I just read from, the idea that everything is in it is the verse describing the 7 fruits of Eretz Yisrael. And as we said, and we will continue discussing this tonight, we're only going to learn about the fruits, but the idea that these trees, they're 2 grains and 5 fruits, but they're called the 7 fruits of the land of Israel. And each one of them is dependent on the geography of the land. In other words, there's certain places that are mostly desert that there would not be any wheat or barley. There are other places that are too cold for date palm trees. So these fruits are totally connected to the topography and geography of the land of Israel. So the verse says, Eretz Chita v'Sorah, the Gefen, the Te'ena v'Rimon, Eretz Zait, Shemen u'Davash, a land of wheat and barley, and grape and fig, and pomegranate, a land of olive oil and date honey. Excuse me, that is the verse. And so what we're going to do tonight is we're going to go through the 7 fruits of Eretz Yisrael. Again, because it's only a day after Tu B'Shvat, so it's very, very appropriate to be talking about and appreciating and praising these 7 fruits of the land of Israel. I should just mention that we know that for different foods, we have different blessings, before blessings and after blessings. And so when we eat bread, that's the first on the list, is Chita. When we eat bread, we have a fairly long after blessing. If we eat something that's made from wheat but is not bread, what's called mizonot, we have a longer blessing, but not as long as bread. Almost all other food is only a 1-sentence after blessing, except for the 7 fruits of Eretz Yisrael. Wheat and barley, meaning if it's a cracker or a noodle or a cake or a muffin, whatever it is, will have a whole, we'll call it a paragraph. And it's the same with the other 5 fruits. In other words, Jewish law makes it a special after blessing for the 7 fruits of Eretz Yisrael. And it's also, if you have a number of foods in front of you, and one of them is one of these 7 fruits, you always choose that first to make the blessing. Let's say you have 8 different fruits in front of you, then you will pick one of the ones of Eretz Yisrael, and there's even an order to which order you do it to. So let's start. We're going to start with wheat, and I'm going to have to kind of confine myself to like 5-7 minutes per fruit. And it's like an overview of the fruit. Each one of the ideas that I bring, we could obviously delve into much deeper. But we're going to call this an overview of the 7 fruits of the land of Israel. So the first one is wheat. And the 7 fruits are connected in the exact order of the verse to the 7 lower Sefirot. This is a very, very deep, profound connection. So wheat is connected to Chesed. And one of the reasons is because to this day, wheat is called the staff of life. And that is God is feeding, God is sustaining the whole world with his chesed. And so the food that most symbolizes that is wheat. Wheat is very connected to the holiday of Shavuot, because on Shavuot, there's a special offering of bringing 2 loaves of bread from the new wheat harvest. Wheat in Israel is always harvested right around, usually a little bit before Shavuot. And so the offering in the temple was 2 loaves of new bread that was from the new harvest. So it's very connected to Shavuot. It's connected also, when I said that each of these 7 fruits is connected to the 7 Sefirot, the 7 Sefirot are also connected to the 7 days of creation. So wheat is intrinsically connected to the first day of creation, because we're told that everything that would ever be created was created on the first day. And it represents God's Chesed. Olam Chesed Yibaneh. A world of Chesed God will build. So wheat is connected to Chesed and is connected to the first day of creation. Its numerical value is 22. And this is very significant because 22 is the 22 Hebrew letters. And there is a statement in the Gevurah that a baby, a child, does not say Abba, Ima until it's tasted wheat or grain. It's grain, but it means primarily wheat. So the connection here is that until a child eats wheat, it doesn't talk. In other words, the development of speech and of digestion are very deeply connected. And here it's connected through wheat. And so Chita equals 22. The word for wheat is Chita, Chet, Tet, Aleph. Excuse me. Hey, Chet, Tet, Hey equals 22. And so there's a deep connection between speech and wheat in this particular case. Wheat is mentioned 29 times in the Tanakh. It's not just a one time, it's mentioned over and over, the idea of eating bread and wheat. Now we know that all of these fruits have a verse in Perek Shira. We've mentioned Perek Shira before. It's a midrash where there's 70 creations and each has a song. And so each of these 7 fruits has a song. Actually, 6 of the 7. So what is the song of wheat? It's Shir Hamalot, Mimama Kim Karaticha Hashem. It's one of the song of ascents. Excuse me. Out of the depths, I called to you, Hashem. How is this connected to wheat? Well, wheat, like most seeds, are planted in the ground and then they're covered up. So when it says, from the depths I call out to you, represents this idea of potential coming to fruition. And that's connected to the whole idea of wheat. Now, there's a custom that when we make the blessing on bread, hamotzi lechem min haaretz, that we put our 10 fingers on the bread. And there's a number of reasons for this. This is a very, very universal custom. We put our 10 fingers on the bread and make the blessing. Excuse me. So one reason is that the blessing for bread has 10 words. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Blessed are you, God, King of the universe, who has created bread from the earth. So because it has 10 words, so it reminds us to put our 10 fingers. There are also 10 mitzvot in the Torah from the moment that a seed is planted till it becomes bread. There are 10 Torah mitzvot connected to it. So some of them are you plant, you can't plow with an ox and a donkey. You can't mix seeds together. And then there's just the whole winnowing process and taking the proper tithing. Until you eat it, there's actually 10 mitzvot. And in this verse of the 7 fruits of Eretz Yisrael, there's also exactly 10 words. Eretz, Chita, v'sarah, v'gefen, v'te'ina, v'rimon. Eretz, Zait, Shemen, u'devash. 10 words. So for all these reasons, we have this custom to remind us of all of these things, and also to help us praise and be appreciative of the Holy Land. There's different opinions. What was the tree of knowledge of good and evil? One of them was that it was wheat, which sounds kind of strange. We always think of this big, huge tree. Nonetheless, they say one of the possibilities was that it was wheat, because as we saw before, the idea that a child can't enunciate, can't talk, hasn't developed their mind to the level of communication until they've eaten wheat. And so the tree is called the Eitzadat Tovara, the tree of knowledge. So there's a deep connection between wheat and Eitzadat Tovara. Like I'm saying, many of these things I'm saying we could expand greatly, and perhaps in the series we will. But the point tonight is just to go through the 7 fruits and get an overview. One last thing, it says, Im ein kemach, ein Torah. Im ein Torah, ein kemach. If there's no flour, there's no Torah. Meaning, if a person is starving, is poverty-stricken, it's very hard to learn Torah. We have some exceptions, stories in the Gevurah about people who were quite literally like that, and they were able to master the Torah anyways. But for most of us mortals, a lack of livelihood would impinge greatly on our ability to be learning Torah. But then it turns it around. Im ein Torah, ein kemach. If there's no Torah, there's no blessing that will bring parnasa, livelihood. Okay, now we're going to go on to barley. So barley in Hebrew is sa'ara. Its attribute is Gevurah. It's the second one. And we're going to see why that is so true. And it's connected to the second day of creation. The second day of creation is when division happens, when the upper waters were divided from the lower waters. And it's the only day that doesn't say that it was good. That God didn't look at the day and say, ki tov, it wasn't good. Not that it wasn't good, but it wasn't good enough to get that phrase, because there was division created. And so sa'ara, in ancient times, wheat, of course, was the primary grain. There's actually 5 grains of Eretz Yisrael. Wheat and barley are the 2 most important ones of them. Barley was considered more of an animal food. It was grown to feed animals. If a person was very poor and had nothing else to eat, they would eat barley. It was considered an inferior type of food. And the connection to Gevurah is in the Torah, if there's a woman suspected of adultery, it doesn't mean that she committed adultery, but she suspected, there was an elaborate ritual to determine whether it was true or not. And part of that ritual or ceremony, she would bring a barley offering, which was it was an exception because it represented something like a Gevurah, like a strict judgment was being made with this ritual. If you take the letters of Barley, Saor, it's the same letters as Rasha, of evil. Doesn't mean that barley is evil. It just means that there's an aspect of barley that it has a certain possible negativity to it. So that's why it's connected to the second day of creation. It's mentioned 36 times in the Torah. I'm mentioning this just so we see that the 7 fruits of Israel are mentioned throughout the Tanakh because they were the primary fruits of Eretz Yisrael. It's not like today where you go to a grocery store and you can see, maybe 50 different kinds of fruits that have been shipped in from countries all over the world. Israel was a very small place, and it had a limit. And so these 7 fruits represented Israel because they were the main trees. They were the main fruits and grains. And so I'm mentioning how many times it's mentioned to see that the geography, the spiritual geography of the land is that it is mentioned over and over. I just see a chat. This is the next thing I was going to say. Probably the most important place that barley appears is in the counting of the Omer. We know that we count 49 days between the second day of Pesach and the giving of the Torah on Shavuot. Shavuot is the 50th day. And why is it called the Omer period? Omer is a measurement. A measurement of what? At the end of the first day of Pesach, they would go down to a field right below Jerusalem where barley was being grown. Barley is harvested before wheat. So right around Pesach time is when barley would naturally be harvested. They would go down to this field with a scythe, and they would take 3 cuttings with a scythe, and they would gather that up. What they gathered up was considered a measurement called an omer. But this is with the stalks and everything and the kernels of the barley. They would bring it to the temple, and they would separate the barley. They would winnow it and grind it, everything through 13 sifters until they had a handful of barley flour. And they would offer it on the altar. And that begins the Omer period. So the Omer is barley. And we know that today there are certain restrictions during the Omer period. Later in history, different things happened that we take on semi-mourning practices. But even before them, it was a time of Gevurah, of judgment. Why? Because the wheat harvest had 7 more weeks to go. If a wheat harvest fails, you could have famine. That's how important of food it was. It was the staff of life. And so from the beginning of the Omer period, there's a lot of anticipation of wanting to have a successful wheat harvest. So it was a time of what's called din. because the grains were being judged, as it were, whether it would be a good harvest or not. So that's connected to barley, why it's connected to Gevurah. Now, what is the verse in Perek Shira for barley? So it says, Tefila la'ani, ki yatov uvelifnei Hashem yishpoch sicho. This is the 102nd Psalm, a prayer of the poor person who, as it were, wraps himself in prayer before God and pours out his troubles to God. So this is a very, very appropriate verse for barley, for everything we learned about barley. Again, I'm not claiming that we're learning everything that we can about each one. We're doing an overview to get a feel of the 7 fruits of Eretz Yisrael. The next one is grapes. Grapes is the sphere of Tiferet. Tiferet is beauty, holism, harmony. And we know that the aspect of Tiferet is between Chesed and Gevurah. Tiferet unites them together. So what comes from grapes? Okay, you have grapes, you have raisins, you have grape juice, but primarily wine. And wine, of course, is a very, very important part of Jewish ritual. But just going back to Tiferet as being the synthesis of Chesed and Gevurah, we know, and the prophets and Jewish tradition is full of the idea that drinking wine in correct measure and as part of holiness, part of Shabbat, part of a holiday, part of a wedding ceremony, a circumcision, is considered a very, very holy, like a sacrament. But when wine is abused, meaning in general alcohol is abused, it's the worst of the worst. And so you can see that grapes, wine, is between Chesed and Gevurah, between good and evil. And that's why the second opinion of what the tree of knowledge of good and evil was grapes from a vine, because it can go like the tree of knowledge between good and evil. It is the third day, is connected to the third day of creation, which is when the vegetable kingdom was created on the third day, where the trees and all vegetation was created on the third day. So this is very connected to grapes, to the central focus. Now, grapes are mentioned 236 times in the Tanakh. And many of the prophets railed against alcoholism. People who really were abandoning the Torah, were not careful about the Torah because of being drunk. And it was very looked down upon. To this day, getting drunk is very looked down upon. Again, drinking wine in its proper measure was instituted by the rabbis, the way we make holy, we sanctify every Shabbat and every holiday, and every marriage and every covenant, circumcision. All has wine as part of it. And we see that Tiferet is right in the middle of the Sefirot. So the grapes, we could see why it's connected to Tiferet. Again, we're just doing an overview. So I didn't mention which parts of the body. Wheat is always connected to the right hand, Chesed. Barley is connected to Gevurah, the left hand. Tiferet is interesting, it's the heart. And they say that because of the antioxidants that grapes have and other minerals in wine, that people are advised to drink wine on a daily basis, especially those who have heart conditions. So it's just an interesting thing that Tiferet is the heart. And they have found out scientifically that especially wine is very, very good for the heart, again, in the right measure. It's interesting that the numerical value of Gefen is 133, which is the same as linagen, to play music, a nigun. So we can see that drink a little wine, you want to sing. Very beautiful connection. And it sounds very funny, but it's actually a very deep connection. Of course, we know that there's this very important phrase, nichnas yayin, yotze sod. Wine goes in and the secret comes out. So it has meaning on two levels. First of all, yayin equals 70, and sod, the secret, equals 70. So in other words, this phrase is based on gematria. Wine goes in, nichnas 70, the secret comes out, 70 comes out. So on one level, it's true. In other words, drinking a little wine opens us up and helps us reach a higher consciousness. On the other hand, drinking wine, people know that you drink a little bit too wine, you start foaming at the mouth, meaning you start blabbering, saying things that under ordinary circumstances you wouldn't say. And so wine goes in and the secret comes out. You start saying things, the next day you don't even remember that you revealed something that you never would have revealed. So again, wine has this kind of like dualistic possibility of Eitz dat tov v'ra, good and evil. Okay, just because of time. Oh, what is the verse? So the verse is from Yeshayahu, the 65th chapter. Ko amar Hashem, ka'asher yimatzeh hatirosh be'eshkol, ve'amar al tashchitehu, ki bracha bo, ken eseh leman avadai lebilti hashchit hakol. Thus says Hashem, like wine is found in a cluster, and a person says, do not destroy it, for a blessing is in it. So will I do for the sake of my servants, for my people, that I will not destroy them all. Obviously, this is at a time where judgment is coming upon Israel. God is saying, just like we wouldn't destroy grapes because so much good is in it, I will never allow all of Israel to be destroyed. Next, the fig, te'ena. So te'ena is connected to the Sefirah of Netzach. Netzach means eternal, victory. We'll see the connection here. One of the phrases in the Talmud about figs is learning Torah is like relating to a fig tree, that you harvest it a little at a time and eat it. What is it talking about? And I know this very well because for years we had a huge fig tree right out our front door. Unfortunately, at a certain point, it died. And we used to get, I'm going to say thousands, it seemed like thousands of figs. And my wife would make jars of fig jam. And to make fig jam, you have to fill a pot to the top, and then it boils down. But we had so many figs, but the way that you harvest figs, you have to harvest them every day. Because as soon as they get ripe, it's not like an apple that it can sit on the tree for a week or 2 or 3 until you harvest it. A fig, as soon as it gets ripe, if you don't pick it, the birds will get it or the insects will get it because it's so sweet and has a smell. So it draws birds and insects. And so I would go out every single day and go around the tree and see which ones were ready, which ones were not ready, and pick them every single day. So the Torah is called an eternal Torah. The Torah is eternal. And so here, learning Torah is compared to how we treat and relate to and eat from a fig tree. So that's its connection to Netzach. It's the 4th day of creation. It's a day that God placed in the heavens, the sun and the moon and the stars and the constellations, the galaxies. And that represents, as best as we can experience, eternity. A couple times in the Torah, especially in this song Ha'azinu, Moshe calls the sun and moon as witness to what he's about to say. And Rashi explains why call the sun and the moon as witness. He says, for all practical purposes, the sun and the moon will exist forever. And Moshe wanted to have an eternal witness to what he was about to say. So figs, the closest holiday we could talk about is Tu B'Shvat, because it's one of the fruits that we honor and we eat and we praise on Tu B'Shvat. Grapes is all the holidays, every Shabbat, because we sanctify it with wine. It is mentioned 44 times in the Torah, and probably the most known is part of the prophecies of the Messianic era, is that at that time, everyone will sit beneath their fig tree and their vine, and no one will make them afraid. And this is repeated a number of times in the prophets, this idea that the future Messianic era is symbolized by everyone will sit under their fig tree and vine. And so, like I said, we had this huge fig tree that the branches went over the walkway leading to the house. And so right next to the house, we planted a grapevine. So we could fulfill this prophecy of every time we walked in and out of our house, we walked past a fig tree and a vine. Unfortunately, the fig tree died, and the vine has stopped producing at this point. One interesting thing, because I know some of you, or many of you, come to the Sunday class. In the Sunday class, we began learning about Chizkiyahu, one of the righteous kings of Israel. Now, one of them, he was considered like the greatest of the kings of Israel. It just turns out that next week, we're going to be learning a story of how he became ill and he was cured by eating figs. It just happens that that's in next week's class. I won't say any more. Hopefully you'll come and you'll hear it. Okay, going on. The pomegranate. The pomegranate is connected to Hod. Hod means praise and thanks, acknowledgement, splendor, all of these different things is Hod. And so the pomegranate tree does have this special feeling about it because of the fruit that it produces. And we'll get to that in a second. And the holiday most connected to pomegranate is Rosh Hashanah. Because on Rosh Hashanah, we eat special fruits and we say special intentions. And one of them is the pomegranate. And we say that we pray that we have the blessing to have as much merit as the seeds of a pomegranate. As you know, there are a lot of seeds in a pomegranate. Some say symbolically, there's 613 seeds in a pomegranate to represent the 613 mitzvot. So eating a pomegranate on Rosh Hashanah is a very beautiful minhag. L'chaim, l'chaim. Now, what's interesting, in one of Rav Ginsburg's books, Body, Mind, and Soul, he connects the different, not just parts of the body, but different systems of the body, like the digestive system, the circulation system. With Hod, he puts the immune system. And it's interesting, and for many people, it's part of a current fad of drinking pomegranate juice because it is so high in antioxidants. It's considered a very, very excellent way to protect your immune system. So it's so interesting that pomegranate is connected to Hod, which is connected to the immune system, and the pomegranate has this nature about it to protect the immune system. It is mentioned 31 times in the Torah, and it's connected to the fifth day of creation, which is the beginning of the creation of the animal kingdom, the fish and the birds. And so what's interesting is here in Israel, and including the fig tree that I had, it grew out of a cave. Maybe a few of you have actually been to my house, but right out of my front door, I have a cave. Quite literally, there's a cave. And this fig tree grew out of the cave. You go all around Israel. Obviously, fig trees grow in other places. But the amazing thing is that you see wild fig trees grow and they put out fruit all over Israel. The question is, how do they get into caves? And the answer is that bats and birds love figs, like I said. And in the, I'm sorry, I'm going back to figs. I'm sorry, I got it mixed up with pomegranates. Okay, I'll mention this anyways, that because birds eat the figs, bats eat the figs, And then they fly into caves, and these little seeds of the fig drop from them, and they actually take hold, and whole fig trees go up. Our fig tree was enormous, and it came from just this tiny little seed that most likely a bat or a fig brought. But back to pomegranates. So pomegranates are mentioned a number of times in the Song of Songs. And just as a preview, one of the things we're going to be doing is just like in our opening class, we read from Parshat Eikev for a description of the land. Other than that, if you look at the whole Tanakh, the whole Bible, the other place where we see descriptions of the land of Israel is in the Song of Songs. And so I'm hoping to dedicate a good amount of learning to the different verses in Song of Songs that mention not just the fruits of Israel, but the descriptions of the land, the spiritual geography of the land of Israel. And so in the Song of Songs, one of the expressions is called Pardes Rimonim, a pomegranate orchard. And the other one is Kepelecha Rimon Rakatech, like a segment of a pomegranate are your cheeks. This is a beloved describing his loved one, that your cheeks are like rosy, like a pomegranate. So what's interesting here is one of the most important Kabbalistic works from the Ramchal, excuse me, not the Ramchal, from Moshe Cordovero, the Ramak, is called Pardes Rimonim. Is the idea that the Rimon has all of these seeds, and that represents, and it's in a hard klipa, in a hard shell. So this represents the secrets of the Torah hidden in the words of the Torah. You have to break it open to get to the seeds. And this book was one of the classics to this day of Kabbalah. It's called Pardes Rimonim, and a very, very famous Hasidic commentary is called Pelech HaRimon. Both of them from the Song of Songs. I'll add a few more things, is that there's a phrase, a very, very important phrase from the sages saying, even the empty ones in Israel are full of mitzvot like a rimon. The empty ones means someone that we might judge as not being so connected to Torah, not so connected to their Judaism. The sages were saying, even someone like that is full of mitzvahs like a pomegranate. This, without exaggeration, we could spend a whole class discussing the truth of this and how it's manifest in different stories about it. But I just wanted to mention this very, very important idea. And here we see how the fruits of Israel are being used as metaphors and allegories of important ideas. The last one I want to bring is that in the temple, in Solomon's temple, he put a lot of pomegranates, decorations of pomegranates. And also we know that the high priest, that the robe that he wore at the bottom had 72 pomegranates and 72 bells. These were like the pomegranates were like tufts of material in the form of a pomegranate. But the amazing thing is that I'm going to show you a picture of the pomegranate, when it opens up in the spring, it literally opens up like the Magen David. Excuse me. That's why it's in my book on the Magen David. But this is not a one-time thing. If you look at a Magen David from like above, not from the side, but from above, you'll see a Magen David. So I'll just show that again. It's very, very interesting. And these are the blossoms. This is when it's opening up. These are the blossoms of the pomegranate. Okay, 2 more to go. And what is the verse from Perek Shira for the pomegranate? Like I said, from the Song of Songs, Kapelach Rimon rakatech miba'ad litzamtech. Your cheek is like a segment of pomegranate behind your veil. So that is the verse for pomegranate. Next are olives, but specifically olive oil. That's why in the verse it says Zait Shemen, olive oil olives, because even though we eat olives and we love olives, the main purpose for olives was to make olive oil. It is connected to the sphere of Yesod, which is foundation. And it turns out, just on a practical level, the most practical of all of the fruits, or the fruit that has the most uses, was olive oil. It was used in those days for lighting. There was no electricity, and it was considered a very clean way of lighting. So everyone had oil lamps. That's why they find in archaeology oil lamps from 2,000 years ago all the time. That's how people lit their houses. And it was for cleaning products were made from oil. Different perfumes were made from oil. Food, olive oil, even to this day, in what's called the Mediterranean diet, one of the most important things is olive oil. Because olive oil is just, as a food, has just so many positive things about it. So it's connected to foundation. Another thing is the olive tree is among the oldest trees in the world, meaning they can last the longest. And that's why, especially in the north of Israel, but not just the north, you see some giant gnarled olive trees, which are quite literally 2,000 years ago, from 2,000 years ago. So the tree itself is like this foundation tree. It's connected to the 6th day of creation. That's the creation of human beings. And this is very, very, very connected to one of the main uses of olive oil in the Torah is consecration. The Mishkan and the temple, all of the vessels were consecrated with olive oil. The Kohen Gadol, the Kohanim, were consecrated with olive oil. And the most important, and the kings of Israel, in the ritual of coronating them king, had oil poured over their heads. And this is the actual meaning of Mashiach. Mashiach literally means the anointed one, anointed with olive oil. And so that's very connected to the foundation, and also just the whole history of human beings and where we're going. And the Messianic era is very, very connected to this idea of olive oil, of consecration, of the Mishkan, the temple, and being Kohanim to the whole world. It's mentioned in the Tanakh 109 times. one of the important places where it appears in, maybe I have a picture in Zechariah, in the famous vision of Zechariah, where he sees a golden menorah. I'm going to try to find a picture. A golden menorah, but on the two sides were branches of olives, of olive oil. Okay, I know I have a picture of it here. Sorry, I'm trying to find it. Okay, no, I couldn't find it off the bat. Anyways, that's a very, very important, because the olive represents peace. That's why the menorah has the olive branches on both sides, going back to when Noah sent out the dove to see if the flood was over, and eventually came back with an olive branch. And ever since then, to modern times, the dove and the olive branch represent peace. So that's a very, very important thing about the olives. And because it's getting late here, I'm going to finish with, and interestingly enough, the olive, and this is connected to it being a foundation, the olive does not have its own song in Perek Shira, but it's the song of the trees. The song of the trees is represented by the olive in a certain way. And there it is, Az Yeranenu Atzea Ya'ar Milifnei Hashem Ki Ba Lishpot Et Haaretz. Then the trees of the forest will sing before Hashem, who has come to judge the earth. 1 Chronicles 16. And now the last one is dates. Dates are connected to Malchut. And just the way that a date tree looks, it's obvious. The date tree is this tall tree with these beautiful fronds, and it represents royalty. And that's why in ancient times, many of the ancient coins were minted with with a date palm. So it represents Malchut. And it's the seventh day of the week, which is Shabbat. And here again, it just says udavash and honey, but it's date honey. And so this represents the sweetness of Shabbat. Seventh day, the sweetness of the honey of the date palm. It's mentioned in the Tanakh 36 times. Maybe the most known one is what we say on Shabbat. It's part of the song of Shabbat. The 92nd Psalm is Mizmor Shir L'Yom HaShabbat. And there it says, Tzaddik Tamar Yifrach. A righteous one, like a date palm, will sprout. So here we see the idea of the tzaddik, of the king, the Malchut, is connected to the date palm. Here, just last week in Parshat B'Shalach, we had one of the most important mentions of date palms is after they crossed the Red Sea, then they came to a place where they didn't have water, and the water was bitter. Moshe sweetened the water. Then they went to a place called Elim. And there it says that there were 70 palm trees and 12 springs of water. The 12 springs of water represent the 12 tribes. The 70 date palms represent the 70 secrets of the Torah and the 70 elders, the 12 tribes and the 70 elders. But the date palms also represent the secrets of the Torah, Shivim Panim LaTorah, 70 faces to the Torah. And we said that the ultimate king is Mashiach. And Mashiach will teach the secrets of the Torah to Am Yisrael and to the entire world. And so kingship is connected very much with the palm tree. And that's a good place to stop. We went a little bit longer than usual, but I got in all 7 fruits, at least as a general idea. And may we all merit to eat the fruits of Eretz Yisrael here in Eretz Yisrael.